The late Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh, in one of his talks, tells us that Buddha suffered like the rest of us. So the question arises as to why should we seek any liberation? Why should we do any kind of spiritual seeking if Buddha himself suffered? But the thing is that what differentiates Buddha from us is that he knew the art of suffering. So he used two important things to understand his suffering, to know the suffering. And the first one was to suffer with understanding. And second is to be compassionate. So when these two things are understood, the nature of suffering transforms, changes. Problem with us is that modern world gives us all the prescriptions, all the methods to avoid suffering. So we have the habit of pushing down the pain, suppressing the pain, fighting the pain. Now, in some cases, if the pain is acute, then that may be necessary. But in the long run, you see, the nature of suffering has to be understood. And once the nature of suffering is understood, the compassion automatically comes up. That is the beauty. So, when Buddha said that samsara is dukkha, samsara, the world of name and forms, is dukkha. Dukkha is loosely translated as suffering, but it is a much broader term because it includes all the minor frustrations, the irritations, the restlessness that is associated with the body conditioning and stuff like that. So he said that samsara is dukkha. And this first noble truth alone was the greatest revelation for me. If the first noble truth is known, that itself brings the understanding that Buddha talks about. A majority of us do not believe in that because we have been so conditioned to materialistic life, to superficial pleasures, that we are always chasing highs in life. So our natural life routine is experience the highest of highs and then go the lowest of lows. So the cycle becomes this alternating current of highs and lows. And there is a constant emptiness, a feeling of a void behind this chasing of highs and lows. So whenever we are alone, completely with ourselves, we cannot bear to be in our own company. Because then we are forced to face ourselves. Then we are forced to confront our thoughts. And immediately a thought appears, we put up a resistance. So the Buddha says, witness the suffering. Because in witnessing, there is no resistance offered to any sensation, any feeling, any thought. So when the witnessing of the suffering happens, the nature of suffering transforms. And Buddha gave the example of the double arrow. Where one arrow hits in your leg, that is pain. That is the first arrow, and it is painful. The pain is genuine, it needs to be treated. The second arrow of Buddha is the suffering related to that pain. Now, that is something which needs to be seen. And once it is seen for what it is, what you will notice is that the second arrow is not actually there. And this is quite similar to what Ramesh Balsekar said when he said that pain in the moment, nobody has any control over that. So, pain in the moment is very real. But once the nature of that is understood, it does not translate into suffering in horizontal time. So that is where the second arrow drops away. But we are so afraid of suffering. We fear suffering, we fear the fear of suffering. But you see, look at it this way. The scene where you see a lotus and the pond. The pond is dirty. The mud where the lotus stands is all dirty. But the lotus is beautiful. But the total beauty of the lotus includes the mud and the dirt in the pond. Without that, there is no beauty in the lotus. You have to see it from totality. Only then you see what is. Only then you witness the true beauty of what is. The moment you say that I don't want the mud, I only want the lotus, you pluck a lotus and you bring it home. There's no more beauty in it. It's dead. The lotus has to be there in the mud. And that complete scene is the total beauty. Similarly, all the pain and suffering that we undergo in this life is a part of the total movement of life. It is the total love, the total beauty of the divine energy. The moment we begin to choose, we say that I want this, but I do not want that. The moment differentiation happens, that is where the suffering becomes a constant feature in our life. That is where the suffering prolongs in horizontal time. So knowing how to suffer is the only way to transcend the suffering. And that is what Buddha observed. He knew the art of suffering, as said by Thich Nhat Hanh, the late Vietnamese monk. We are always in a fight. We are always in the avoidance mode. We don't want to feel. We think that we are trying to face the fact, but a majority of times we are avoiding everything. Now, if something is too intense and something requires an external help, by all means take that help. It is not to say that if there is something too intense, then you have to bear it. It's not about bearing it. It is about seeing it for what it is. This perception is very different from the personal perception. There is no personal seeing here. When the suffering is witnessed and seen for what it is, there is no individual there to suffer. Therefore, pain in the moment does not become suffering in horizontal time. So learn the art of suffering from Buddha himself.